Today I'm going to tell the story of James, my favorite truck driver. The air was thin and tasted like cold, stale metal and diesel fumes. Route 66 at 3 a.m. is not a highway. It's a black scar across the desert, swallowing the light. I had the windows down, trying to fight the road fatigue that felt like concrete setting in my skull. I was pushing the rig, 40 tons of refrigerated beef, somewhere between Flagstaff and nowhere. It wasn't the silence that finally got to me. It was the absolute lack of movement. No crickets, no wind, no distant rattle of a ghost train, just the low, hypnotic rumble of the engine vibrating through the seat cushion. And then the smell, wet copper and something rotten. Not typical roadkill. This was heavy, musky, like a butcher shop floor covered in swamp mud. I slammed the brakes. The air horns hiccuped in protest. I knew immediately I shouldn't have stopped. Every trucker's instinct screams, keep moving.
Don't engage. But there was something in the middle of my lane. It looked like a pile of dark fur and bone shards catching the headlight beams. I cut the engine. The silence that followed was instant and brutal, pressing against my eardrums. The darkness outside the cab wasn't just night. It was solid, heavy, like spilled ink. I grabbed the heavy maglite, the one that weighs 5 pounds and doubles as a club, and swung the door open. The immediate cold of the Arizona night hit me, sharp and clean, but it couldn't wash away that smell, copper and decay. The pile on the road was a deer, or what was left of one. It wasn't hit by a car. This wasn't a standard collision. The body was torn open with sickening precision, like someone had tried to peel the hide off, leaving the inside spilled in a glistening, wet ruin. But the edges of the wounds weren't jagged like a coyote or a mountain lion. They looked torn, then pulled. And then I saw the prints.
I've been driving the long haul for 20 years. I know tracks. Bear tracks are round and heavy. Dog tracks are compact. These were long, narrow, almost human, but ending in 4 enormous blunt claws that dug half an inch deep into the asphalt shoulder. They led off the road, into the low scrub brush, heading toward the shadows of the mesas. Where was Yasmin? Yasmin, my co-driver, was supposed to be asleep in the bunk. I spun around and climbed back into the cab. The blanket was thrown back. Her pillow was there. Her emergency flashlight was gone. My heart didn't just pound, it hammered, a sickening drum solo of pure, cold fear. I knew we hadn't stopped for an hour, maybe more. How could she have left? Why? I grabbed the CB radio mic. Yasmin, you copy? Yasmin, talk to me. Static. Then a sharp, choked burst of interference that sounded exactly like a scream being cut off. I threw the mic down. Underneath her bunk, near the floor vent, I found it. Her portable 2-way radio.
Smashed. Crushed flat, like someone had stomped on it with a boot made of solid steel. I looked out at the deer carcass, the prints, the heavy, metallic smell that was getting stronger, warmer, as if the air itself was bleeding. I stepped back out, scanning the shadows. The darkness felt alive, watching me. I took 3 steps and found the blood trail. It was thick, almost black in the moonlight, and it didn't flow like spilled liquid. It looked smeared, as if something heavy had been dragged, leaving a continuous, ugly track off the pavement and into the desert. I had to follow it, not because I was brave, but because the alternative, driving away, leaving her, was worse than any monster. The trail led me about a quarter mile off the 66, straight into the mouth of a ghost, an old, completely abandoned roadside complex, a gas station and a diner next to it, the Silver Spoon, its neon sign shattered, hanging by a single rusted chain. The smell here was overwhelming.
Copper was mixed with old, mildewed grease and the dry, musty scent of long dead dreams. I gripped the maglite so hard my knuckles turned white. The blood trail went right through the broken glass of the diner's front door. Clang,
The sound came from inside, sharp, unmistakable, like metal hitting tile. I pushed the door open, shards of glass crunching under my boots. The interior was pitch black, thick with dust and mold. I swept the powerful beam around, booths slashed, vinyl hanging like rotting skin. The counter was covered in rat droppings and a thick yellowish film of ancient grease. And in the center of the room, the blood trail stopped. No drag marks, just a thick pool steaming slightly in the cold air, right near the counter. I moved forward, the silence so loud it hurt. I checked the kitchen entrance, then the hallway leading to the bathrooms. Nothing. Yasmin wasn't here. But on the counter, next to a rusty napkin holder, there was an old composition book.
Hardcover, oil-stained, dated 1987. It looked like a shift ledger. I flipped it open. The pages were mostly blank, except for one entry written in thick, smudged charcoal, almost a primal scroll. It hunts the moon, it hides the harvest. Don't come back on the night of the bone sliver. The date was blurred, but underneath the words, the page was scored deeply, not sliced by a knife, raked. 3 parallel lines of destruction, like a cat, but massive. Show don't Luby. This place was a trap. I heard the sound again, not metallic this time. It was a faint human sound, a whimper, immediately choked off. It wasn't coming from the main dining room. It was coming from the back, maybe the freezer or the storage room. I followed the sound, the beam slicing through the darkness, pulling me deeper into the moldering core of the building. The hair on my arms stood straight up, a cold static charge running over my skin. I kicked open the swinging door to the kitchen.
Stainless steel tables, a huge exhaust hood dripping black residue, and a chilling aroma of blood and industrial cleaner. And there she was. Not Yasmin, a girl. Young, maybe 16, huddled under a prep table, clutching her knees, eyes wide and raw with terror. She was shivering so violently, her teeth were chattering loud enough to fill the silence. She wore clothes too light for the desert cold, a t-shirt, torn at the shoulder. "Easy, kid," I whispered, lowering the light. "My name is Ubi. I'm a trucker. Are you hurt?" She looked up at me, her gaze flickering past my shoulder, fixated on the entrance to the kitchen. "They took the others," she finally choked out, the words catching in her throat. "The others at the camp. Who took them? Police? Rangers?" "No," she whispered, shaking her head frantically. "The thing. It was here. It came in the truck." "Wait, what truck?" "Yours. No, another one. They were following us. My friends, Yasmin. They tried to stop it."
Yasmin, she was here. Was. Where is she now, kid? It took her. It dragged her out. And it was talking. My blood ran instantly cold. Wolves don't talk. Bears don't speak English. What did it say? Eliza. I would learn her name later. Didn't answer. She just pointed, trembling, toward the back door of the kitchen, a heavy wooden slab, secured with a thick iron bar. The bar was bent outward, snapped clean in the middle. The wood around the frame was splintered, not cut, but exploded outward. "It went that way," she mumbled. "But it said it needed the moon to be full to finish the job." A new sound slammed through the thin walls of the diner. It wasn't a growl. It was a rip, guttural, wet, like someone tearing leather and meat off a bone. Closer than before. "It's back," Eliza hissed, burrowing deeper. I aimed the mad light toward the shattered back door. Nothing. The light cut out into the endless desert night, but the sound was closer. I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my boots. The sound of massive claws scraping against the concrete path outside. Heavy breathing. A snuffling, wet sound. And then a new smell hit me. overpowering the diesel and the mold. This wasn't just decay. This was hot blood, adrenaline, and a horrific stench of ozone and raw meat. I lifted the mag light higher. Too late. The air shifted violently. The kitchen door was blasted inward, not opened. The wood frame gave way with a splintering shriek. And then I saw it. It filled the doorway. Too tall for a man, its shoulders broader than the truck tires. Not just fur, a mantle of thick, matted black and gray hair, slick with something dark, stretched over muscle masses that defied human anatomy. Its head was low, snout long and terrible, but the way it stood, upright, balanced, was wrong. Its eyes. I'll never forget the eyes. They weren't animal eyes. They were intelligent, predatory, twin embers of deep, burning ember.
They fix on me, calculating the threat. I felt the air vacuum from my lungs, my legs locked down. I was paralyzed, looking at the creature that shouldn't exist, a nightmare made of iron muscle and bone. It wasn't just big, it was furious. A low, grating rumble started deep in its chest, a sound that vibrated the fillings in my teeth. It took one step into the kitchen. The floor groaned. I snapped back to reality. Survival. Go, run, back door, I screamed at Elisa, shoving her violently out from under the table. She scrambled out. I grabbed the nearest thing, a fire extinguisher, and threw it directly at the creature's face. It hit with a loud clang. The creature didn't flinch. It blinked once, slowly, the amber eyes never losing their intensity. Elisa was heading for the front dining room. Wrong way. I grabbed her arm, hauling her back toward the splintered exit, pulling her past the steaming pool of blood that I now realized must have been Yasmin's. We burst out the back.
Desert scrub, black shadows, and the promise of a long, terrifying run back to the truck. The creature didn't roar. It moved. Faster than I thought possible. It covered the distance between the kitchen and the path in 2 strides. I felt a massive impact on my left boot. Not a bite, a grab. Claws, thick and curved like sickles, pierced the leather and locked onto my ankle. The pain was immediate, paralyzing. I went down hard. Elisa screamed, a high, panicked sound that seemed to delight the thing. I looked down. Its muzzle was inches from my shin. Its breath was hot, rancid, smelling of the slaughterhouse and sulfur. I didn't think. I just reacted. I had my hunting knife strapped to my belt. I yanked it free and plunged it downward, blindly, aiming for the massive wrist locked on my boot. The blade hit something hard. Not flesh, but gristle or bone. The creature hissed, a sound like pressurized air escaping a cylinder, and the grip loosened just enough.
He kicked, tearing my boot free. His leather ripped, separating from the sole. I scrambled to my feet, dragging Elisa with me, limping desperately across the gravel. We had about 50 yards to the rig. I didn't look back until I reached the driver's side door, throwing Elisa inside first. I scrambled in, fumbling for the key, my heart trying to claw its way out of my throat. The engine caught. I slammed the shifter into drive and mashed the accelerator. The 40-ton rig squealed, spinning gravel, roaring back onto Route 66. I didn't stop to look for the deer carcass or Yasmin's smashed radio. I drove fast, 100 miles per hour into the darkness. After about 5 miles, I risked a look in the side mirror. The road was empty. The desert was quiet again. But then, just as I was about to relax, I saw it. Far behind, near the dark, hulking shadow of the abandoned diner, it was standing there, perfectly still.
Its silhouette, too tall, too defined against the sliver of moon, was watching the lights of my truck disappear, It wasn't running after us, it wasn't chasing. It was just observing, letting us go. I gained Eliza, shivering and weeping beside me. I lost Yasmin, and I gained this certain terrifying knowledge that out there, beyond the thin shell of the cab, the rules of reality break down. The creature didn't pursue us because it didn't need to. It knew where we were going. It knew the road was finite. And worst of all, it was intelligent enough to play the long game. You think the danger is over because the wheels are spinning? You're wrong. The real terror starts now. I had about 50 gallons of fuel left, and I was speeding towards the next dead end. Wait till you hear what happened when the fuel gauge hit empty. The darkness had teeth, not metaphorically.
Actual, grinding teeth that scraped against the steel chassis of the cab, the sound ringing through the enclosed space like a terrible church bell. I was hunched down, jammed between the driver's seat and the gear shifter, clutching the heavy wrench I kept under the seat. My shirt was soaked, not just sweat, but the damp, freezing condensation that clings to metal in the desert night. The air inside the cab was thick with fear and something else, a sickening, coppery odor, like a slaughterhouse mixed with wet dog and ozone. It had ripped the driver's side mirror clean off. I heard the pop of the plastic housing, then the crunch of the glass being pulverized, followed by a heavy, wet thump as the thing's massive shoulder pressed against the door. I thought, this is it. This is how Ubirayara dies, pinched inside his own truck on Route 66, miles from anything. The silence that followed the mirror incident was worse than the noise. Complete, absolute absence of sound.
Not even no chirping of crickets. It was the silence of a predator assessing its prey. A thinking silence. I didn't dare breathe. My eyes were fixed on the door handle, which I'd locked 3 times. Suddenly, a shadow fell over the passenger window. A shadow too large, too jagged to belong to anything on this side of extinction. The window wasn't glass anymore. It was a slick, wet film. It wasn't looking at me. It was smelling me. I could hear the wet snuffling sound, loud, right next to my head. The wrench felt useless, like a plastic toy. Then the clawing started on the window frame. Not frantic, but deliberate. The thick, rubberized weather stripping around the glass began to tear, peeling away with a noise like ripping adhesive tape. The sound was high-pitched, insistent. Don't move, don't move. A single, thick finger, more like a black chitinous spike, poked through the gap where the rubber had been. It was hooked, rigid, and it smelled like rot and sulfur.
It was testing the opening. It wasn't trying to smash the glass. It was trying to dismantle the truck piece by piece. Intelligence, twisted and horrifying. I knew I had maybe 10 seconds before it leveraged the door open, or before it decided the window was easier. Staying here meant dying trapped. I moved the wrench a millimeter. The scraping paused immediately. It heard that. Everything stopped. Heavy, rhythmic breathing resumed outside the door, but it was shallower now, expectant. It knew I was awake. It knew I was ready. I didn't try the radio. I didn't try the horn. I did the only thing I could think of that might buy me half a second. I grabbed the emergency air brake release. The screech was deafening. A sudden, massive hiss of pressurized air blasting out from under the rig. I threw the passenger door open while the monster was momentarily distracted by the sound. I hit the asphalt running, the wrench still clutched like a useless talisman.
The chill of the desert air was a slap in the face. My boots skidded on the loose gravel. I didn't look back, but I heard the door of the truck being violently ripped off its hinges behind me. The noise was so loud, so final, a tearing sound like a giant piece of paper. It momentarily paralyzed me in stride. I sprinted toward the only building I'd seen in 50 miles, a boarded-up rest stop and gas station, decades old, squatting under a sputtering halogen light. The ground vibrated behind me. That wasn't just running, that was a boulder rolling downhill. I reached the doorway. The wood was rotten, the glass is smashed out. I shoved through the flimsy door, slamming it behind me, and stumbled into the darkness. The rest stop was dead air and dust. It smelled of old coffee grounds, stale cigarettes, and deep, penetrating mold. Every sound I made, my ragged breathing, the clatter of my boots, echoed unnaturally loud. I didn't have time to process the environment.
I was looking for a weapon, a hoe, anything. Hello? The sound wasn't mine. It was a whisper, thin and panicked, coming from the back, near the restrooms. I froze. My heart hammered the inside of my ribs. I wasn't alone. Who's there? I whispered back, my voice barely functional. A rustling sound, followed by a low, desperate crying. Two figures emerged from the shadow of the women's bathroom entrance. Two kids, teenagers, Yasmin and Elisa. Their faces were white with dust and terror. Yasmin had thick black hair matted to her forehead, and Elisa was clutching a broken broom handle. God, thank God, a human, Yasmin gasped, stumbling toward me. We were trapped here since sunset. Trapped by what? I demanded, my eyes darting back to the front door, which was already flexing inward under massive pressure. The things, she choked out, her voice breaking. They didn't let us leave. They were circling the building. They look like wolves. They stand up.
Things, plural. My stomach twisted. The door shuddered, rattling the entire structure. The creature outside was tired of testing. It was going for brute force. We need to go, now, I barked, grabbing Yasmin's arm. Is there a back exit? The kitchen. Elisa pointed frantically toward a dark hallway. There was a cellar door, but it's bolted. We ran. The front door of the rest stop exploded inward just as we reached the swinging door to the kitchen. Splinters flew through the air like shrapnel. I glanced back. The light from the single remaining street lamp poured in, illuminating the doorway. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a bear. It was impossibly big, maybe 9 feet tall when fully upright, hunched slightly under the ceiling. Its fur was the color of dried blood, matted with mud and God knows what else. The muscle structure was appalling, taut cables wrapped around bone. But the worst part was the face. A canine muzzle, yes, but the eyes were set too close together, too intelligent, reflecting the light like polished stones, devoid of pupils. It hesitated, taking in the scene. It sniffed the air, then its head swiveled toward us with unnatural speed. It roared. The sound wasn't animalistic. It was deep and bassy, vibrating in my chest, a sonic shockwave that threw dust off the ceiling tiles. "The cellar!" I yelled. The kitchen was a mess of rusty shelving and overturned vats. The air here was even fouler, heavy with stale grease and something metallic and sharp. Elisa reached the far corner first, scrambling to lift the heavy steel bolt securing a trapdoor in the floor. Her hands were shaking too badly. I shoved her aside and grabbed the bolt. It was heavy, corroded. Turn, turn, come on. We heard the creature enter the kitchen. It didn't walk, it loped, covering the distance in sickening, soundless strides. I yanked the bolt back. Go.
Go down. Yasmin dropped it first, disappearing into the black hole. Elisa followed immediately, dissolving into the basement air. I stayed above the opening, wrench raised, waiting. The creature stopped 5 feet from me. It didn't charge, it studied me. Those eyes were full of malice and calculation. It lifted a hand, dripping with viscous liquid, and slowly dragged its claws across a stainless steel counter. Screech. A warning. A taunt.
I didn't wait for the attack. I dropped into the darkness, slamming the heavy wooden trapdoor shut above me. It was total, engulfing blackness. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of earthworms and something like old concrete dust. "Lock it," Yasmin whispered frantically from somewhere below. The underside of the trapdoor had a sliding latch. I fumbled for it, my fingers slick with cold sweat, and rammed the bolt home. A second later, the force hit. Kthum!
Whatever was outside dropped onto the trapdoor with the weight of a small car. The wood cracked instantly. Splinters rained down on us. I stumbled back, landing hard on the packed dirt floor. Yasmin and Elisa screamed, a choked, muffled sound. The creature didn't stop. It began to tear at the wood above us, focusing its incredible strength on the weakest points. The sound was horrifying, the ripping of thick oak fibers, the snap of supporting beams. "We have to move," I whispered, scrambling to my feet. "It's coming through." I grabbed the broken broom handle from Elisa, though I knew it was useless against that thing. The cellar was a tight, oppressive space, filled with dust-covered relics, moldy boxes, ancient canning jars, and thankfully, a narrow, rickety set of wooden stairs leading down further. "Where does that go?" "I don't know," Yasmin sobbed. "We didn't go down there. We had no choice. We plunged down the stairs."
Lower level was even colder. Colder than the earth itself. The air felt heavy, like breathing underwater. The ceiling above the stairs gave way with a final massive crunch, and we heard the monster's terrible, heavy impact on the floor of the upper cellar. It was in. We were in a crawl space now. It was barely high enough for me to crouch. The girls had to crawl. "Stay quiet," I hissed. I could hear the monster moving above us. It wasn't trying to find the stairs. It was walking methodically, slowly, sniffing the air, tracking our scent. The floorboards above us groaned under its unbelievable weight. Then the tap, tap, tap started. It was tapping the floor, testing the structural integrity, locating the hollow space where we were hiding. It was hunting us like a specialist. The tapping stopped directly above me. A deep growl, heavy enough to shake the dust onto my face, filtered through the rotten wood.
Then, a claw, the same black spike I saw earlier, punctured the wood about 6 inches from my face. It retracted quickly. It found us. I backed up, crawling faster than I ever had in my life. Yasmin and Elisa were ahead of me, their movements desperate, silent prayers escaping their lips. "Keep going." The crawl space opened into a concrete drainage tunnel. We scrambled in. The tunnel was damp, running with a trickle of foul-smelling water. I could still hear the furious tearing noise behind me as the monster ripped up the floorboards. We crawled through the dark tunnel for what felt like eternity. My knees were scraped raw. Finally, we saw a sliver of light, a narrow exit, likely a drain overflow pipe, leading outside the rest stop. We burst out into the night air, gasping. We were behind the old building, near the dumpster and the neglected diesel tanks. "The truck," I wheezed, pointing back toward the highway.
"No, wait." Elisa pulled my sleeve, pointing to the shadows by the diesel tanks. "There's another one." My blood went instantly cold. Another shadow, smaller than the first, but equally wrong, hunkered by the tanks. Its eyes caught the light from the moon. Not one, two. The roar of the first monster came from the building, much closer now. It had found the tunnel entrance. We were trapped between them. I didn't think, I reacted. The tanks. I dragged a discarded metal pipe from the ground and swung it hard against the side of the closest diesel tank. The clang was huge, reverberating across the empty plains. The second smaller creature flinched, momentarily startled by the noise. That was all I needed. I pulled a road flare from my jacket pocket, a standard piece of equipment for truckers, ripped off the cap, and struck it on the concrete.
The white-hot, intense red light instantly illuminated the space, banishing the suffocating shadows. The monsters hated it.
The second creature, closer, hissed, recoiling from the blinding light and heat. Its fur seemed to smoke where the heat touched it. I threw the flare straight at the first monster, which was just emerging from the drain pipe. It landed at its feet. The beast stumbled back, letting out a shriek of pain and pure rage. "Run! Get to the highway!" We sprinted. I risked a final glance back. The creatures were circling the flare, their movements jerky, hesitant. They were afraid of the light, afraid of the fire. We scrambled over the low retaining wall, separating the rest stop from the main highway. My truck was still there, the cab door hanging uselessly, a grotesque maw. The three of us jumped inside the fuel tank access gap, the small space between the cab and the massive tanker. It was tight, but it offered cover. I slammed my fist onto the air horn button.
We held it down, shaking. The screechers hated that sound too. I saw them on the roadside, running away from the noise, retreating toward the darkest scrub brush bordering the desolate. I kept the horn screaming until my hand cramped. When I finally let up, the ensuing silence was earned, but it wasn't safe. It was the silence of temporary retreat. I managed to start the engine, the vibrations a welcome sensation of power. I drove the truck forward, leaving the torn-up rig door hanging like a useless broken wing. Yasmin and Elisa were shivering, curled up behind the seats. We drove for 40 minutes without speaking, the windows down, searching the darkness with desperate eyes. We dropped the girls at a legitimate service station near Flagstaff, where they collapsed into the arms of the overnight attendant. They kept repeating two things: the black claws, and they never let us look at the moon. I couldn't stay. I had to keep moving.
I drove until the sunrise bleached the Route 66 asphalt white. I finally pulled over outside Albuquerque, the adrenaline completely gone, replaced by a deep, bone-aching exhaustion. I didn't stop because I was tired. I stopped because of what I saw hanging from the busted antenna of my truck. It was small, about the size of my thumb, a piece of fabric, the corner of a patch, green and white. It was torn, soaked, and stuck tight to the metal. It was the corner of a Girl Scout uniform patch. I drove those two girls to safety, yes, but I hadn't been fast enough for everyone. The horror wasn't just a confrontation, it was a harvest, and the silence of the desert wasn't empty. It was holding its breath. I sold the truck 3 weeks later. I didn't tell the buyer about the scratches, or the deep, invisible grooves in the metal that smelled faintly of iron and decay. I don't drive Route 66 anymore.
Every time a moon is full, I can shake a metallic taste of fear. I smell the wet fur and the cold, awful understanding. They weren't just animals. They were hunters, organized, and whatever they were collecting, they're still out there, waiting for the night to fall and the engines to roar. Don't let the darkness take you unprepared. Hit subscribe and stay awake, because I'll be back next week with another story that might just save your life or take your sleep forever.